countries like India, China, Russia, they're starting to net settle their trade in gold. I'm not calling for the end of the US dollar. I still think it's the strongest fiat currency of all the fiat currencies, but we're definitely going through a shift where more and more of the global financial system, I think, is going to shift across to gold. And eventually that'll be bullish for Bitcoin as well. If you're listening to someone who talk about macro, who's not mentioning AI, what are you even doing listening to them? Some really respected people and podcasts that are talking about everything that's going on in global macro, but not mentioning AI. The rules of the game are changing, not just from a monetary standpoint, but from a technology standpoint. All right, what is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Money, Markets, and Mayhem. This is your host, Mark, and I am back with you this week solo. Thank you to everyone who watched last week's or the week prior's episode. We're doing these every 2 weeks now. So thank you to everyone who watched the episode with our first guest, Jesse Myers of the Smarter Web Company. Amazingly, I was just looking at the price of the Smarter Web Company, and I think their stock is up about 40% since he featured on our podcast. So look, I'm not saying that the podcast was responsible, but you know, maybe it was. Maybe a couple of you crazy degenerates out there saw the pod and decided to hit the buy button and force that price up. We've got some big whales in the audience, perhaps. But no, it was great to have our first guest on, Jesse, talking about all things Bitcoin and Bitcoin treasury companies. We will be doing more. We will be doing more outreach. We'll be trying to get more guests on the show. Ideally, I'd love not to do these solo episodes and just to have the guests. You guys can put in the comments if you think that's a great idea. What did you enjoy? Do you enjoy the solo episodes more, or do you enjoy the episode with guests? It's only been one guest, so I know it's hard to say. But yeah, we are in talks with a couple of more guests in the space, and I've got some big ambitions to get some pretty big macro guys on the pod as well. So yeah, that's exciting. That's exciting. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit. This one here is a little bit unscripted. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a look into the things that I'm watching week in, week out, the things that I'm subscribed to week in, week out. And I'm going to break them up into 3 tiers. Free, under $1,000 a year, so relatively affordable, and over $1,000 a year. And I'm going to break up those 3, and I'm only going to focus on things or people who are producing content regularly, or at least, almost every week or every other week, right? I think most of the things I'm going to take you through are releasing content every week, and then some are fortnightly, some are monthly. But one thing that I'm working out and discovering with my trading is less is more. I need to be making less decisions for more return on investment. A lot of the daily trading can be exciting, can be invigorating. It can be, adrenaline pumping and can really help and push that dopamine, that urge for the dopamine. But at the end of the day, the big money is not made in those short-term moves. The big money is made where you get the swing, where you catch the swing on something, or you get in on something when no one else is talking about it. And so what I want to be focusing on much more, like I have been doing for the last 3 days, I've just been researching deeply into specific things. And then when the time is appropriate for me to put on those bets on those things that I've been researching, I'm going to do so. And so I want to move my trading more to that opportunistic, big theme, longer term, and then really come in and nail the trade when the opportunity and the time is right, based on the background that I've been learning with trading and the short-term stuff. So the short-term stuff is handy because it gives you a little bit of an edge on being able to enter these trades at the right time and not buy at the top. Not that anyone is immune to buying at the top, because I've recently done so with my largest position, Metaplanet. So, but the goal is to try and be more focused on these opportunities. So I want to go through today some of the leading podcasters, content creators, macro investors that I follow that are releasing content regularly. And these are the guys that I think are on the money when it comes to how to be understanding the game moving forward, because I think that the game is changing. We are going through a once-in-a-generation shift or more. I think the last time that we had such a big shift as we are experiencing now was 1971, when the US ended the gold standard and basically started the fiat system. I think what we're going through now is going to be looked back on in time as the next big shift post 1971. And in short, that shift is moving from a fiat-backed system, or not moving from a fiat-backed system, should I say moving from US dollar fiat dominance, where the majority of the world's receipts and transactions are occurring in US dollars, to a more multipolar world where countries like Russia, India, China, and now some of the smaller countries are starting to store their reserves in gold rather than US dollars. And they're starting to net settle their trade in gold rather than US dollars. So I'm not calling for the end of the US dollar. I still think it's the strongest fiat currency of all the fiat currencies. But we're definitely going through a shift where more and more of the global financial system, I think, is going to shift across to gold. And eventually, that'll be bullish for Bitcoin as well. Although in these periods of transition and change and volatility, it's often bad for everything except gold. And if you've been watching the markets, you would have seen, gold rip from, 3,400 to 3,700 in the last week or so. And I think we're still early. I think the shift to gold and to then consequently then Bitcoin is going to continue. So I want to introduce you to the guys that I think are at the forefront of this change, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what each of them kind of specializes in. So the first is the free tier, and we're going to start with Jordi Visser, a brilliant macro mind who I really hope to get on the podcast soon. He has been in the game for a very long time, was a full-time trader from like the 80s to the 90s or to the 2000s. And now his main focus is on macro, or his main focus has been on macro. Now he also writes research for a company called 22V, which you can pay for. But why I think Jordi is amazing is because he weekly is talking about the intersection of the old school indicators, PMI, inflation, ISM. He's talking about them intertwining with the new world that we're going into, which is an AI-driven world, a world where the meaning of productivity, GDP, and all these indicators is about to change. And he talks about the nexus of these old world macro indicators, the new world shift to AI, and the role that Bitcoin and gold, etc., has in bringing about all this change and the shifts. And he's at the forefront of, he has a famous quip where he says, if you're listening to someone who talk about macro, who's not mentioning AI, what are you even doing listening to them? And in his recent episode, he shows some really respected people and podcasts that are talking about everything that's going on in global macro, but not mentioning AI. And he thinks that's crazy. And I tend to agree with him. The rules of the game are changing, not just from a monetary standpoint, but from a technology standpoint as well. Nothing changes things as quickly as technology. Nothing shifts a system as quickly as a new technology. So this is Jordi Visser. He releases a 30 to 45 minute podcast, drops I think I get it every Sunday or Monday Australian time. So he does it over the weekend. And I'll give you a quick sneak peek at the first 30 seconds of this week's episode.
Payrolls, stagflation. We didn't see long-term yields go up. Stocks keep going. I'm going to keep harping on the size factor because the only things I get from people are refusals to accept Tesla and refusals to accept small caps. So we're just going to keep going with it until the sentiment starts to
right? He's really bullish on Tesla at the moment, not so bullish on the rest of the Mag 7, bullish on small caps. And, he goes into detail about why he's bullish on Tesla, robotics, etc. He mentions all the traditional macro things that are happening as well and what they mean in context of new things.
And the data keeps supporting it. Macro players still having trouble with that, not focusing on AI. Time to focus on national housing emergency. If you only watch one thing today, spend it on national housing emergency. Regime shift signs are intensifying. AI is cannibalizing itself. It's power time. And Tesla's $1 trillion man. All right, payrolls.
Right, amazing. He is actually the guy that got me onto the Moonshots podcasts. And this is like my favorite new podcast at the moment. This is Moonshots with Peter Diamandis. And this is excellent. Every single thing that is happening at the forefront of AI, these guys talk about weekly. If you're investing and not watching this podcast, you are at risk of being disrupted. This is probably my favorite new podcast. It's 100% free. And I think anyone who's interested in the space has to be watching this Moonshots podcast. My goal is to make my content more cutting edge like this, maybe less finance based, more macro technology intersection based, but let's see over time. Anyway, incredible. Jordi Visser also has a podcast with Pomp that he does every week, and that drops around about the weekend as well. On this, they talk more about Bitcoin, technology. They spoke a lot about Tesla and the bull case for Tesla in this episode. But this is another one that I recommend you must watch. I'm a fan of all things Jordi at the moment. I think he is at the cutting edge of how to play this game.
What the Mag 7 accomplished from 2007 to today, in 15 years, people have to go look.
Breathtaking.
Yeah, I mean, you went from 1 trillion to 15 trillion when you combine all that. This is going to take a lot less time. So Bitcoin's going to get to 15 trillion. It's going to happen. And I believe it's going to happen in much less time. The reason is because of artificial intelligence. So
what's going on, guys? Today,
right, you just can't, everything that's going on at the moment, you can't separate it. You've really got to subscribe to Jordi. He is amazing, and he's putting his stuff out for free, right? So incredible. Pomp is a hustler as well, incredibly wealthy, was incredibly early to Bitcoin, and speaks to some amazing guests. 672,000 subscribers is no mean feat. To be able to get that means that you must know what you're talking about, right? Otherwise, that many people would not follow you. Has been criticized for being too pro-Bitcoin in the past, but I think he's eased up on that, and he's definitely going more broad, more macro. The next one is Joseph Wang. So I actually subscribe to his affordable research, which is in the tier 2 stuff that I'll show you in a minute. But every week on the weekend, he puts a market wrap out, a weekly market wrap that basically goes through the 3 most important things that he thinks happened this week in markets and macro. He used to work at the Fed. He was part of the trading floor. The Fed has a group of traders that do open market operations or something like that, and he was part of those traders. He's a good trader in his own right. He's made some great calls, and a little bit more traditional. Doesn't really focus on AI.
Hello, my friends. Today is September 6th, and this is Markets Weekly.
Here are the 3 things.
So this past week, we saw the S&P 500 briefly touch new all-time highs, but was faded pretty aggressively. I think the standout to me in the market the past week was, of course, gold.
Anyway, he really breaks down the market from a lot of important angles, and he understands the Fed plumbing. And the Fed is one of the most important things to the whole monetary system. So I love watching Joseph. Adam Taggart from Thoughtful Money. He's more a journalist rather than a trader or a macro guy, but he has some of the most amazing guests on his show quite regularly. Some of the guests that I will watch every time they come out, people like Jim Carson, Lacey Hunt, Lawrence Lepard, Danielle DiMartino, Booth, Darius Dale. He's another one that I haven't mentioned today, but Brent Johnson. Darius Dale I won't mention today. Here he is, Darius Dale, Luke Groman. I used to subscribe to Darius. I'm not at the moment, but he's an amazing one as well. From a macro affordability point of view, actually I might. So this is basically the affordable macro, $20, $30, $50 a month, affordable type stuff. So under $1,000. These are the things that I recommend. 42 macro. And why Darius is amazing is because he comes from a trader's background. He comes from a macro background that understands growth, inflation, policy. Think of Ray Dalio and the models that Ray Dalio kind of come up with to measure growth and inflation, accelerating, decelerating. He's from that school, and he has really, really affordable, like institutional grade macro research that's affordable. And he also overlays that with a trading system. So we'll show you when to get out, when to get in, when the big shifts are coming. And so he's amazing as well. Definitely check out 42 macro if you kind of want to more trade the cycle. So what should you be invested in when growth and inflation is accelerating? Darius will tell you. What should you be invested in when growth and inflation is decelerating? Darius will tell you. What should you be investing in growth is accelerating, inflation is decelerating, or when inflation is accelerating and growth is decelerating. There's 4 quadrants. So Darius's model is based on those 4 quadrants, and he basically talks about what the best thing to be invested in each of those quadrants. And he has a risk overlay model that helps you determine when to size up, when to size down, when to cut your positions, etc. Lynn Alden releases every 2 weeks, I think. She's extremely affordable research, and she touches on the big macro themes, global liquidity, Bitcoin. Hasn't really gone deep into AI, more traditional stuff, like she'll look at energy and things like that. I'm bullish on energy, and she's an engineer by background and super smart. Our podcast that got the most views was me breaking down Lynn's talk at the Bitcoin conference. Had over 7,000 views, had the most views. So Lynn is amazing, and I recommend following her as well. Joseph, who we mentioned before, has a paid service. I think it's about $20, $30 a month. And he publishes an article once a week, very short read, on the big thing that is happening in politics or Fed or macro plumbing world. And so definitely an important read. One of my favorites, affordable, is Michael Howe, Liquidity. Another one that I hope to get on the pod. This guy is the godfather of liquidity, in my opinion. He's been working on liquidity since the late 90s back at Solomon Brothers, where they kind of pioneered this liquidity analysis. And he's been so spot on in calling the cycles. So calling when the liquidity cycles are going to start, peak, trough. And this is really helpful in order to get positioned for these shifts, because without liquidity, assets don't go up. With liquidity, assets go up. And I think a lot of the asset price trends that you see are driven by liquidity factors. Now, what is liquidity? Liquidity is not just having buyers and sellers in a market. That's different. That's market liquidity. Michael Howe talks about liquidity from 2 levels. Basically, central bank liquidity. So are central banks central banks and banks putting money into the system or taking money out of the system on net? And he also talks about shadow liquidity and balance sheet capacity of non-central banks, cross-border flows, payments, things like that. He's got a great book if you want to kind of learn his method, called Capital Wars. It was written, I think, in 2020, and it breaks down his method in a little bit more detail. But his global liquidity picture is, if there was only 3 things that I could look at, his global liquidity picture would definitely be one of them. The Acid Capitalist, again on Substack and affordable. Now, Hugh Hendry is like left field, has a $35 million house in St. Bart's, was a hedge fund manager during the global financial crisis, made 50% a year on gold. But Hugh's brilliance is in his ability to be able to think contrarian and to see things bigger picture that other people might not be able to see. He has an amazing understanding of the US dollar, which I think is the most important metric, most important single one thing in global macro is the US dollar. And he understands it intimately. He understands the games that other countries are playing around the dollar. He understands the importance of the dollar crosses with other countries' currencies. And Hugh is amazing to listen to because he's like a storyteller. It's low stress, but it's high bandwidth attention type listening where you're just enthralled by the types of things and discussions that he's talking about. He runs a Acid Capitalist summer camp each and every year, which I'd love to get to because I think it'd be so much fun. He seems like a cool guy, a bit of a rock star. But yeah, the way that he's able to see the world, I think, is incredible. And you might not necessarily be able to trade off his insights each and every week, but bigger picture, incredible to listen to. Now, the next one, Hedge Eye, I would probably credit Keith McCullough from Hedge Eye as teaching me the most about short-term trading. But don't be mistaken, Keith is an incredible short-term trader, but he also, Darius Dale used to work at Hedge Eye, so he also understands the Ray Dalio 4-quadrant economic model. He has a massive team of analysts and researchers, and they have, a heap of different offerings where they've commoditized like a retail subscription or a tech subscription or a software subscription. Like he's got analysts across every industry, energy, the works. But in my opinion, Keith's brilliance is in his ability to understand the whole game and to be able to understand short term how to trade in the pocket. This guy timestamps all his alerts, his trade alerts, kind of like what I'm doing with the 10K challenge. And his win rate is one of the best that you'll find. Now, he's always chopping and changing, so taking profit. He's always buying some, selling some, so never kind of like going balls to the wall in Bitcoin or any asset. He has very strict levels, no more than 3% allocation to a single stock, no more than 6% allocation to an ETF, no more than 10% or 12% allocation to gold or 10% to a currency. He has very specific rules, but if you want to learn the game as it's played at the hedge fund level, where you're talking about managing your monthly P&L and always trying to month on month be increasing and compounding your capital, there's none better, in my opinion, that is teaching the general public, right? And every single trading day, or nearly every single trading day, they have what's called the macro show. And Keith is on it most days. And I recommend starting off by getting access to the macro show so you can kind of hear how Keith is playing the game on the daily. This is tier 3 of those subscriptions as well in terms of price. So this is, over $1,000. But if you want to get better at trading and understanding the whole game, Keith is the guy. And then you can veer off into learning options, or you can veer off into learning different kind of techniques. But if you're new to this and you want to do more than just invest, if you want to like actively be going in and out of positions, I think Keith is your guy, followed by Darius. Keith is probably teaching a little bit more and has access to a bigger team, whereas Darius is more a one-man type guy, and he's like action without so much explanation and teaching. So yeah, that's Keith McCullough. Definitely recommend that if you guys want to trade more. FFT, Luke Groman, I've spoken about this guy so much. I'm subscribed to his tree rings and his full reports. It's more expensive again, I know, but it's this is quality research, and he is like at the cutting edge of explaining the trade war, the China war, the US-China tariff war, the shift to gold, the shift to Bitcoin, what's happening in this new global order. And his research has just been spot on. He gets it from like another level. So many things that I am focused on come from Luke's research. And his tree rings, which is the 10 most important things he's seen each and every week, is incredible. And the way he's able to tie seemingly insignificant things together and show the bigger picture of macro is incredible. So he was one of the first that I heard basically saying that Trump's trade war would have no teeth, because at the end of the day, you couldn't impose such a trade war when the US dollar was so high. And he was one of the early ones that saying that Elon Musk's Doge was going to fail, because you can't cut the budget when the dollar's so high. You have to deflate the dollar and the debts first. I'm not going to do some of his themes justice in this quick synopsis, but he was one of the first on the street basically saying Trump is going to chicken out with these tariffs, because at the end of the day, the military backs the US dollar, or the US dollar backs the military, but the US military cannot build its equipment, its plants and equipment, without Chinese rare earths. And that basically America can't go to war with any country without the blessing of China, because China is basically 95% of the rare earth supplier to the whole world. They control 95% of the supply chain. And so any attempt to go to economic war with or hot war with China is going to be limited by your ability to source rare earths from China for the magnets and metals that need to go into all your military equipment. And so he was one of the early ones basically tying all this together and saying that eventually Trump would have to chicken out on the tariffs because it was going to cause a bond market sell-off, which it did. And he's called this the whole way through. So his research is incredible. And if you want to take that next level in macro, you must subscribe to Luke Groman. All right, I've got a couple more. So Real Vision has a bunch of different tiers. But Global Macro Investor by Raoul Pal is my most expensive subscription. It's monthly. It ranges from 70 to 100 pages every month. Talks about the business cycle, and he talks about the everything code, which is basically how the business cycle, liquidity, and all global assets are intertwined, and which of those leads the global asset cycle. He's made some incredible calls. His research is awesome. He's up like 1,000% since his Bitcoin call. He's up 1,700% since his Ethereum call. He's made some incredible options calls on things like Coinbase, Hood, Tesla, Rocket Lab. And a lot of the stuff that he talks about in these reports, he touches on in his free podcasts. And he obviously gives trade updates in these GMI releases. The other thing that is incredible about this is their technology focus. They have a gentleman called David Matten who writes a feature article each and every week on the cutting edge forefront of AI, things that we're not potentially seeing and how that impacts the investing world. And Raoul has also been joined by Julian Bittel, who I think has just taken his macro and business cycle research to the next level. This is something that this is something that when you really want to take this game seriously and do this full time, I think you have to be subscribed to. It's he's done a lot of interviews with Jordi Visser, so a lot of the same stuff that Jordi talks about, but Raoul obviously goes into detail in his monthly research reports. So he's amazing. And then and then you can also sign up for Real Vision. Real Vision has a free membership, also has a couple of entry tier memberships. But if you can't afford the GMI and you want like a starter, cutting edge AI, macro, business cycle, crypto, Real Vision Pro, which I think is about $4,000 or $5,000 US, is where I would go, because it has Ra, it has Julian, and I think sometimes it even has some articles by David Matten. So this is the one that I would look at as a cheaper version of GMI. You get a lot of the stuff that GMI gets. You get it a little bit later. Sometimes you don't get the trade alerts when we get them. But this is awesome stuff as well. And then the last one, which I've only recently just subscribed to, is Fundstrat, Tom Lee. He has been one of the most right macro Wall Street guys over the last 10 years. He's been pro Bitcoin, pro tech, pro Ethereum now with his Ethereum treasury company. But this guy knows his stuff. Like everything that I hear these other experts talk about that I've mentioned earlier, Tom Lee knows about and has heard about. He also, the fundamental core foundational part of all their research is demographics. So it's not just feels or vibes or crypto or trends or AI is the new thing. All his research is based on demographics as well. And he's been able to pick major bull market tops and bottoms with his fundamental demographic research. So bottoms up, but also has an incredible team of analysts, crypto analysts, macro analysts, technical analysts. I've only just signed up to it. Tom Lee's amazing. I wish I was kind of listening to him sooner. He has been famous for going on TV every time we have a big correction and saying, buy the dip, because the dip will be bought, shall be bought, must be bought. And so he in the face of adversity and market corrections, he's come on TV, on CNBC, and he said, buy the dip, buy the dip, buy the dip. And he's been proven right since, 2010 or whenever he started kind of coming on and saying that kind of stuff, maybe earlier. But what I love most about this guy is he's in the weeds, but he also has a long-term view. And recently he was on a podcast where he basically said that demographics align with these major bull market tops and bottoms. I think he was saying that 2008 was a key demographical pivot point, and he says that the next demographical pivot point will be 2035, when the millennials, the peak millennials, peak out and start to move from their peak spending age and winding back their spending. So he's of the opinion, it seems to me, that this bull market that we're in is going to have corrections, but we are going to be in a long-term bull market until 2035. So look, let's see. But Fundstrat's amazing. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about those in future episodes. This one's gone pretty long. I know I've thrown a lot at you guys. So any questions at all about any of these research services that I've mentioned, any further questions at all, please pop them in the comments. And if we get enough questions, I'll even do the next episode basically answering the questions on all of the comments on each of these research providers, because I understand that it's most likely that people listening are not going to go out and subscribe to all of these like I currently do. And you probably don't even have time to watch all the free ones. So my advice would be to pick the ones that most speak to you and that you're most interested in, or pick the one that most speaks to you or you're most interested in, whether it's paid or free, and ask me questions in relation to that. And hopefully I can provide a little bit more color, a little bit more detail, as I probably haven't done these guys justice trying to fit so many of them in one pod. So yeah, I'd love to do another episode and answer more questions on it. As a reminder, please sign up for the Money, Markets and Mayhem 10K challenge, or my 10K challenge, where I'm basically trying to turn 10K into 100K or more trading options. We've got nearly 1,000 of you subscribed already. We're up about 44% since the 9th of July. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride, but I'm starting to get a little bit more confident in how to trade this smaller account So yeah, I write a daily update whenever I make a trade, and they've been pretty well received. Ultimately, guys, I want to in future build something where as a community we can kind of meet and share ideas, whether that takes the form of a Discord channel or a WhatsApp channel or a Substack. We will see. But as I start to get more engagement from you guys and more following, I'll look to try and build some sort of community where we can share ideas. So it's not just me to you guys, it's you guys to many, or, us sharing ideas to many, and then us battle testing those ideas with one another in these groups. So if you are in favor of something like that, or you'd like to be part of something like that, again, please pop it in the comments, and it'll be good to know how you think that should be structured. So anyway, that's it for this week. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time for Money Markets in Mayhem. Good luck trading out there.